I'm 25, and I live in a cozy two-bedroom apartment that used to belong to my uncle. Back in my university days, I became close friends with someone I'll call Mary, who's now 27. Mary's upbringing was rough, there's way too much to unpack here, but I always made sure she knew she could count on me if things ever got bad. When we graduated, I invited her to move in with me rent-free. She tried to pay her share, but I knew she was drowning in student debt, so I told her to put every spare penny toward paying it off. She was so grateful, and honestly, I loved having her there. We never clashed, our cleaning habits were the same, our taste in TV matched perfectly, and we never had petty arguments over the remote or who was on trash duty. Fast forward to tonight, we were at this super fancy restaurant in London celebrating Mary. She had just cleared her last bit of debt, landed a big promotion at work, and finally passed her driving test. 3 huge wins in 1 month, absolutely deserved a big night out. Our group was me, Mary, 4 of her co-workers, and 2 old uni friends. The evening was going perfectly, until it wasn't. At one point, I handed Mary a card filled with a heartfelt note about how amazing she is and how lucky I am to have her in my life. Inside, I tucked some cash to help her get her first car. She immediately burst into tears, thanked me over and over, and hugged me for what felt like forever. When she finally let go, I told her how proud I was of her for tackling life head-on, building a successful career, and proving to her dad that his awful ways couldn't keep her down. I mentioned how inspiring it was to see her go from scraping by through uni, working low-paying jobs and pinching every penny, to absolutely thriving in her dream role. That's when her whole demeanor changed. She looked irritated and said, "Please don't do that. You know I don't like it when you do that." I'd never heard her say anything like that before, so I was blindsided. I quickly apologized, explaining I didn't realize my words would upset her, because I never meant them in a hurtful way. She just scoffed, rolled her eyes, and I noticed her colleagues giving me dirty looks, shaking their heads like I'd committed some huge offense. I felt my stomach drop. I wanted to disappear into my chair. Mary didn't speak to me for the rest of the evening, and when it was time to leave, none of her co-workers even made eye contact. Later, when we got home, I tried to apologize again as she headed to her room, but she brushed me off, said she was tired, and told me we'd talk in the morning. That night I barely slept. I kept replaying every interaction we'd ever had, wondering if I'd crossed a line before and just never noticed. She'd never once hinted that my compliments bothered her. Now I was terrified she'd want to move out or worse, cut me off completely. To make it even more confusing, her co-workers started texting me, calling me an __, and accusing me of belittling her. That crushed me, because my words had been meant to build her up, not tear her down. Update, 6:30 a.m. After lying awake all night on the verge of tears, I finally heard her moving around in the kitchen. I went in, expecting an awkward confrontation, but she was acting completely normal. She was chatting about some drama at work while I just stood there, unsure if I was supposed to bring it up or let it go. I apologized again, but she looked at me like I'd grown a second head and asked why I was sorry. I reminded her about last night and how upset she'd seemed. She laughed and told me, "It doesn't matter, don't worry about it," before going back to making breakfast. I asked if maybe the money had been too much, or if my words made her feel small, but she shook her head. "Nope, we're cool. I think everyone just misunderstood what happened, and you're taking it too personally." I told her about the texts from her coworkers, how they were still calling me names and accusing me of belittling her. She shrugged, said they probably misread the situation, and promised to talk to them. Meanwhile, I was standing there, running on no sleep, feeling like I'd been put through an emotional ringer. It baffled me she'd ignored me for the rest of dinner, her colleagues had looked at me like I'd committed some crime, and yet here she was, acting like nothing happened. I still felt unsettled, so I decided I'd bring it up again after work. Update, 10 a.m. One of our old uni friends who'd been at dinner called to check in. She said she'd never seen Mary snap at me like that before and wanted to know if everything was okay. I filled her in on what happened, and she agreed it was completely out of character. She'd also congratulated Mary, given her money in a card, and even bought her an expensive gift just like others had, so she couldn't understand why my words had caused that reaction. We decided we'd need to sit down with Mary and talk about it properly. Our other uni friend felt the same way, so they planned to come over later. Meanwhile, Mary's colleagues hadn't stopped messaging me, one even told me not to sweep this under the rug. I was tempted to block them all just to get some peace. Update, 4 p.m. This is the part one never saw coming. Things went from confusing to absolutely insane in a matter of hours. One Redditor had suggested maybe our mutual friends had told Mary's coworkers something about me that made them dislike me. When my uni friends came over, I asked them about it, but they both swore they hadn't said a word. Claire, the friend I'd spoken to earlier, offered to call one of Mary's colleagues she knew, let's call her Jane, to clear the air. Jane ended up coming to the flat in person, and the second she walked in, I could tell she was furious. The glare she gave me made me want to duck behind the counter. We all sat down, and I explained that I'd already spoken to Mary and she'd told me everything was fine, though I was still confused. Jane just laughed coldly and said, "Oh, don't try that, with me. You can't pretend now that you've been exposed in public." The three of us just stared at Jane in stunned silence, all equally lost on what she was talking about. Claire finally broke the quiet and asked her to explain. That's when Jane said she knew how I really treated Mary. Both Claire and I pressed for details, and Jane launched into this full-blown rant, accusing me of constantly abusing and belittling Mary, intimidating her into silence, and making her fake a happy front for everyone else. I honestly didn't know whether to laugh in disbelief or cry from the shock. Then she pulled out her phone and showed us a string of texts from Mary. In them, Mary claimed she was locked in her room because I'd been having a meltdown over her making friends at work. That never happened, not even close. Claire and our other friends scrolled through the messages too, reading one false story after another. How Mary was supposedly scared of me, how I trapped her in the apartment, how I was extorting rent money from her. I had to look away because the lies were so outrageous they made me feel sick. One of the messages claimed I'd cancelled her 21st birthday plans at uni and forbid her from going out. The truth? Claire and our other friend were at her 21st birthday, a Great Gatsby-themed night she'd always dreamed of, which I personally spent over £500 making happen. But in those texts, she claimed that night never happened. Piece by piece, it became clear Mary had been feeding her co-workers this entire fabricated story about me being some controlling, abusive monster who charged her sky-high rent so she couldn't afford to move out. I was shattered. She'd been like a sister to me through all of university, and now I was learning she'd been painting me as her villain. I couldn't wrap my head around why. For sympathy? For attention? What did she gain? After we went through the accusations one by one, I pulled up my bank records to show Jane the truth that Mary never paid me a single penny in rent, only half of the utility bills. Jane's hostility softened, replaced by the same confusion we all felt. She admitted Mary had told all her colleagues that I pretend to be supportive but use her past against her in private, so when they heard my compliments at dinner, they assumed they were just backhanded digs. I was left speechless. The betrayal cut so deep I couldn't even cry at first, I just sat there feeling hollow. Then it hit me all at once, and I completely broke down. Claire had to calm me because I couldn't stop sobbing. It was humiliating, but I couldn't control it. By the time I got a grip, I was still furious, but at least able to think straight. My friends told me not to do anything impulsive, even though they were disgusted by what they'd read. I knew clearing my name with her co-workers was probably impossible, but honestly, I didn't even care about them. I just wanted to understand why Mary had done this to me. Jane left quietly, and I couldn't tell if her opinion of me had really changed. My two friends decided to stay until Mary got home so we could all confront her together. Final update, 10:15 p.m. Mary's gone. I told her she had a week to pack her things and get out. I still can't believe she threw away years of friendship for pity points at work. When she walked in and saw us watching TV, she lit up and offered to make popcorn like nothing was wrong. Claire told her to sit down, and the look on Mary's face went from cheerful to cautious. Claire took the lead because I couldn't even look Mary in the eye at first. She explained that Jane had been over, accusing me of being an abusive bully, and asked Mary point-blank why she'd spread that. Mary played dumb at first, claiming it was all a misunderstanding and that Jane twists things. Then Claire brought up the texts and the specific accusations. Mary's tone shifted, she said it was all just a work joke that had gotten taken out of context. Claire kept pressing, and eventually Mary broke down. She started crying, saying she never meant it, that it was stupid, that she loved me, and it was just a story that got out of hand. She begged me to forgive her. But I was exhausted, physically, mentally, emotionally. I told her flatly she had 1 week to find somewhere else to live. That's when the begging turned frantic, pleading with me to let her stay because I don't even work with them, so it shouldn't matter. I told her I wasn't going to have that kind of poison in my life. Then I asked her, "Do you just make up lies about everyone? Is any of it real?" That shut her up instantly. And in that silence, it hit me, if she could invent abuse from me, what else had she lied about? I thought back to all the heartbreaking stories she'd told me in uni, her dad beating her mom, her being homeless from 16 until the divorce, and I realized I couldn't trust a single word. I told her to call her mother right then. She panicked, begged me not to, but Claire caught on and asked if everything she'd told us about her dad was true. Mary finally cracked and admitted she might have embellished parts of it. That was it for me. The whole thing erupted into shouting as we pieced together that her so-called tragic life story was mostly fiction. I later called her mother myself, turns out her parents divorced simply because they fell out of love. No abuse. No homelessness. Just a normal split. I was stunned. This person I defended, supported, and trusted for 7 years turned out to be a skilled manipulator who would lie to everyone around her for sympathy. I'm drained beyond words. So this is it, my last update. I came here looking for help to fix what I thought was a small mistake with a close friend. Instead, I found out that my entire friendship was built on lies. I'm done with Mary. I know she can afford her own place, so I don't feel the slightest guilt about kicking her out. I don't care where she goes next, I just need her gone. I'm booking therapy because I need to process this nightmare. It's not the ending I wanted, but it's the only one I have. To everyone who gave advice, thank you. I'm sorry it's not a happy resolution. My only hope now is that I can move forward and leave all of this behind me. Additional update. Mary moved out the Saturday after everything went down. In the days leading up to it, she just sort of moped around the flat, clearly wanting to talk, but I wouldn't let her. I told her I needed space. When the weekend came, her mom showed up to help her pack because Mary was moving back in with her. That's when a lot of the questions I'd been holding on to finally got answers. For years, Mary had told me that her dad was abusive, that her mom loved him too much to leave, and that she ran away at 14, sleeping on benches in train stations just to avoid living under the same roof with him. According to her, she only moved back in when her mom finally found the courage to divorce him. It turns out every bit of that was fiction. She was never homeless. Her father never laid a hand on anyone. In fact, her mom said he loved both her and Mary deeply. The real reason I never saw him was because he'd moved to Australia to advance his career. Work came before marriage, and that's why they split. He'd invited Mary to spend summers with him countless times, but she always refused because she hated flying. The day she finally left, I stayed in my room, avoiding the whole scene. But before she walked out for good, she knocked on my door. I answered, because as angry as I was, this was still someone who'd been my closest friend for years. It didn't feel right to let her vanish without saying anything. She asked if I wanted back the money I'd given her for her car. I told her no, suggested she use it for therapy instead. She cried hard, tried to hug me, but I kept my distance. I told her plainly that this would be the last time we would ever see or speak to each other. I couldn't have her in my life knowing what she'd done. She left sobbing, and the moment the door closed, my little town flat felt bigger and emptier than it ever had before. Adjusting has been strange. For the first week, I still half expected to find her in the kitchen when I woke up, or curled up on the couch when I got home. The absence was unsettling. I had my first therapy appointment last week. I was nervous, since I haven't been to therapy since I was in school, but my therapist turned out to be a warm, understanding woman who helped me see that Mary's lies were hers alone. They weren't my fault, and I didn't create them. A lot of people have suggested she might be a compulsive liar or even a narcissist, and my therapist said that, from what I've described, it's not an unreasonable theory. In yet another twist, Jane reached out and asked to meet for coffee. She wanted to clear up a few things. She told me she'd been wondering why Mary chose me as the target for her fake abuse stories, so she started quietly asking people at work what Mary had said about me in the past. That's when she learned about a guy in the office, a painter who works in art restoration, who uses his art to process the trauma of an abusive stepmother. Apparently, Mary took a liking to him and decided to tell him about her abuse to create a connection. She'd mentioned before that she found him attractive, but I never thought she'd go that far. When he found out the truth, he was furious. He doesn't speak to her now, and Jane said most of the office keeps their distance because they're afraid she might make up stories about them next. Hearing that honestly made me feel a little bad. I know she's miserable. Our whole friendship group has cut her off, and now she's burned bridges at work. Jane apologized for believing Mary's lies, but I told her she had nothing to be sorry for. She was just trying to protect someone she thought was being abused. We left on good terms, but I doubt we'll ever be close friends. Claire stayed over for a while, which has helped with the loneliness. It's hard going from having someone constantly around to suddenly living alone. And finally, to all of you who left kind messages, thank you. Many of your comments were incredibly helpful and comforting. It's been a horrible situation, but knowing there are people out there who've been through something similar and are willing to share their support has made it just a little easier. I'm truly grateful.